In order to effectively demonstrate how input is handled in JavaScript, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through an example program for you. First of all, what you need to realize is JavaScript is just a utility used within a web page. So what that means is that you get data from the user in JavaScript the same way you get data from the user in any web page. Typically speaking, that is handled through a form. And on this form, we see typical form type controls, things like text boxes and buttons and whatnot. There is a manual way to go through this whole process, but it does take a fair amount of code to make it dynamic and set up each individual one. So what I've done is I've set up a system inside of helper.js, which essentially sets up our user interface buttons. Let me just scroll down to it for us. Graphical user interface. And I've created these two pieces of functionality which will essentially allow you to create buttons and text boxes within your program, allowing the user to type data in and then signal to the programmer when they're done typing. Now it's a little different depending on the language you're working in. In some languages you have to get one piece at a time. So for example in C#, you have to ask for the data, retrieve the data, ask for the second piece of data, retrieve that second piece of data, and it can get pretty tedious for both the programmer as well as the user. In web pages, it's not so difficult. We can actually do things in a lot more streamlined process. So we can set up an entire form with labels that signify what to type in instead of asking for each individual piece of data separately, and then situate text boxes beside those little prompts that say that give the user a place to type in. Now the user doesn't typically type in one thing, hit submit, type in another thing, hit submit, type in another thing, hit submit. That'd be very tedious. What the user will typically do, let's say for example you're registering for an account on a web page, like maybe a Gmail account or something like that, you fill in your name, you fill in your extra email address and all the important information that they request, and then when you're all done, then you hit that submit button, and it might look something akin to this. Now this is a very simple program that we're going to build, which essentially has a title, it has two labels which act as prompts, and two text boxes which act as locations for the user to physically type things in, and then a button, a submit button, that will allow the user to signal to us as programmers that, hey, I'm all done typing, you can retrieve that data now. You'll notice that the layout of this is very precise. So the text beside the text box is obviously implied to be with that text box, just based on our natural reading habits, which are left to right and top to bottom. And that's the way you should be situating your pages anyway, because you got to follow the same process the human eye is used to doing. If you have your data scattered all over the place, they're never going to know what's going on. Much like if I click in this box here, if I hit the tab key, it will automatically go down to the next box. It won't go to the calculate area button. That doesn't make logical sense. It should be following a path that makes sense for the user, so it's intuitive, and the user's never or questioning what they should be doing next. Now the important thing here is, why do we have this length and width here? Why don't we just put the text boxes and write length and width in there? Well, the problem is once the user starts typing, that indicator of what they're supposed to be typing is now gone. So it's always good to have a separate little piece of text beside the text box, which is permanently there. What this allows us to do is what we say is prompt the user for information, which is another way of saying asking for or instructing the user what to type in. So obviously length, I'm going to type in the length of the rectangle here. So if I did this, let's just try this out. Let's say we have a length of 3 units and a width of 2 units. If I click calculate area, we should get a result of 6 units, and down at the bottom we can see the area is 6. So the calculations work just fine. I'm just going to refresh the page so it's nice and clean. So our process today is going to go through and figure out, well, how do we create all these controls, text boxes and buttons, in order to allow the user to do this. We're going to focus on one piece at a time. We're going to start off with the text boxes, because we can't retrieve the data unless we've typed something in the first place. So and then once we're done the text boxes, we'll lead into the buttons, and that will finalize what we're doing.